Does the Genocide Convention have any preventive effects, for instance, as regards the protection of the rights of ethnic and religious minorities?
I think there are examples in Africa where regional efforts have been made. I'm thinking now, it goes back several years, where there was political violence in Togo, and the African regional leaders basically went in there and said, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. And they were effective at doing it. I think if we look, we could actually catalog the situations where those types of initiatives, at the very high political level, where you have not a condemnation by an NGO or a resolution by the European Parliament or something, but where there's a much more immediate engagement and where they go in and stop that type of violence. And we certainly need more of that. And that comes from, first of all, the ability to have you have a great problem with that in a country like Syria, but that's because it's gone beyond the region, actually, and because the region is so divided itself. And where you can get more coherence in the region, then those things are more likely to work better. Does anybody have any doubt that if in Europe we had in the middle of Europe that if we had a rise of a movement like that today, that there wouldn't be huge efforts at a political level by the European Union, by member states, by all the organizations we have to go and prevent something getting out of hand. And I think, personally, I'm rather confident that we have that. People say, just another thought, people say that, we're in a context like the 1930s again with the rise of populism and everything. And while there's no doubt that some of these movements sort of resemble some of the extremist movements that were around in the early 1930s and that ultimately came to prevail in some of the European countries and led to the Second World War. They didn't have the United Nations then, they didn't have the International Criminal Court, they didn't have the European Union, they didn't have the Council of Europe, they didn't have the OSCE. We have now a huge number we have systems, mechanisms, law, that's all there to make sure that those things don't repeat themselves. And while you can't say that they might all collapse, they're a huge obstacle to the populists and the demagogues who would like to return to that situation. They know that if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do things like destroy the European Union. Now, some of them are trying to do it, of course. Trump's trying to do it. Some of the people in the UK are trying to do it. And there are others throughout Europe who are trying to do it. But they know they've got to do that if they really want to pursue that agenda, because otherwise we'll stop it.
You mentioned violence, and my last question would be then, what are actually the blinking lights, the red lights, what are the main indicators that one is supposed to supervise and monitor to see early warning mechanism happening from the civil society and others to prevent genocide, escalation?
Well, I was present in Rwanda in 1993 when genocide was being cooked up, so to speak. I was part of a human rights fact-finding mission that went there and that warned of the danger of genocide in early 1993, 15 months before genocide took place. And what I think convinced us that this was something that was threatening was that we saw hate speech, racist hate speech, violent incitement, which is something you can see in many parts of the world. Violent incitement with a racist dimension. You see some of it in Myanmar, associated with official sanction, that this was somehow coming at the highest levels and that they were talking about not just driving people out, but actually exterminating them. And there were signs of that in Rwanda. So I think you're looking for that kind of thing. Of course, prevention goes right to the most basic level. Ultimately, genocide is a crime based on racial discrimination. And so any manifestation of that, we need to stop. And what's at the root, what's at the source of it is the idea that one human group is inferior to or superior to another. So that's where we have to start with equality rights. At the very basic level. It may sound trite and banal, but actually that's the best way we're going to do it. Better protections of human rights at the most basic level and a greater recognition of our fundamental equality as human beings.